Disabled by the host. So Ryan, I'm sure that is on me in some way. Make co-host. Now you should be able to turn your camera on if you feel comfortable doing so. And if not, that's totally okay. Hello, Ryan. So everyone, our next panel discussion, presentation for the evening is I'm hearing from some parents who are hearing from some humans who are parents of children with autism and or related disabilities. Many of us in attendance are folks who serve kids and families, right? And don't forget that and families part, right? Kids don't exist in a vacuum just like we don't. And so as much as we are embedding ourselves into a child's day-to-day, we're also embedding ourselves into a family. And BCBAs or psychologists, whoever sort of your supervisor, the independently practicing clinician, often connects with the families. And often our RBTs, our BTs, our paras don't have as much contact with parents. And so I wonder if maybe you feel like you're missing some information. You might like to ask questions and just listen. And so we have Beth Gurka, Ryan Sanford, and Holly Connor. I want to be sure to touch on our professional and ethical compliance code to be sure that I'm being clear and explicit that I am not serving in a therapeutic capacity any of these families. I think that's important to state for a variety of reasons, and not just the ethics code because the BACB says I have to, right? There's reasons for that. It's because our families are vulnerable to providers, right? If I were to ask, hey, do you want to do this? Would anyone really feel like they could say no? Would we be worried that there could be some sort of, not retribution, but like some sort of pushback from that? Yes. And so these are not rules that exist to be just anything other than to make sure that we are keeping the light focused on those that we're serving. So I want to be sure to name that. It'll be up to them to share as much or as little as feels comfortable for them. Just like with anybody's story, it's not up to anybody else to share it. Just like Stephen shared his story in his words, it's not only would all of us fall short trying to express somebody else's lived experience, it's also not our story to tell. So I am grateful for the three of you to be here tonight, as well as to be in my life. I would not be the clinician I am without these three women in a variety of ways. And I hope that you all know that. I always cry when things are important to me, and what we do is important. So many folks are not surprised to see this. And I think that's important, right? We can't lose our humanity. We are humans humaning with other people, oftentimes in our most vulnerable times. So maybe we could start by maybe sharing sharing in what ways you've received behavioral services currently or by history, and maybe how you've seen that change over the course of time. And Beth, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me okay? All right, so I'm Beth. I have two kiddos on the spectrum who are both teenagers now. And I'll just share, Becca is my lifelong friend, and literally since we were one. So I don't know that I could have done this journey without her, quite honestly, for a number of reasons. So my daughter Lily is 15 and a half. She is a bit lower functioning with her communication. She has ID and a plethora of other things. So we've accessed a lot more services for her than we have had access to my son Tristan, who is 13. He's higher functioning in a lot of ways, although he has his fair amount of struggles. But accessing services for him has looked very, very different. So we're in Pennsylvania. And when we started accessing services, when Lily was, it started with early intervention, but when we actually got into some actual behavioral supports, it was BHRS services. So different than ABA, not as specific to the diagnosis, and also the interventions were not as clear cut. So she started with those services when she was in kindergarten, and we had those through most of her middle school age. That was supports both in school and in the community. So she had a TSS with her throughout her entire day at school. And then when we started putting her into camp services in the summer, it was like neurotypical camps. And she had to have somebody with her at all times. So we had 40 hours a week of TSS services, which is a lot. In Pennsylvania, at least, that's kind of unheard of. But that provided her the opportunity to be in the community. Tristan had much less in terms of the hours that he received, but for kindergarten, well, I guess it was first grade and second grade, he had TSS services halfway through the day at school and none in the community settings. And then with that, we had, I guess, like, it varied depending on the time of our life and what was going on, whether it was a mobile therapist or a behavioral consultant that was there. And really, they were the same person. It just varied on what their role was at the time. And we had that for both kids for, I don't even know how many years, coming into our home consistently. So that was our formal kind of behavioral health services that we've had.
Yes. And just so everybody knows, Lily turned 16 in January and she's having a neon fluorescent glow skating party, and it's gonna be everything.
Heck yeah.
Thank you, Beth.
Yep.
Holly or Ryan, do either of you want to go next?
Fine, since you're not going to do it, I'll do it. I guess we've had services for a long time. I mean, we basically have always went to ABA for everything, just because Cody kind of was classic autism and needed that definite structure to be able to give him what he needed, and we saw it be effective for him. So definitely have seen it evolve. My son's 20 now, so I can remember in the beginning it being a little bit more just about compliance and getting them to do what you said to do when you said to do it. And I've seen it definitely evolve into realizing that they're a person that has emotions and feelings and their own way of thinking, and that we need to be a little bit more creative in how we approach getting them to understand some things. But I was always really grateful for the fact that we were able to find something to teach him some of those concrete things that we needed, the safety pieces, the, understanding, if there's a fire, if there's, a medical emergency, or, some of those things people don't understand, need a different approach for some of our kiddos to be able to learn it. And they might not see maybe the method to the madness, but there is a reason why it's done. And I think that was always important for us. So I know we did music therapy for a little while, and Cody loved that. And he was just not one to take to a whole lot. I mean, he was always kind of a cusp kid of just right there in the middle. If he wanted to do it, he was going to do it, and it was going to be great. And if he didn't, then we weren't going to do it. And that was all there was to it. So we've really tried really hard to let him have his own voice as far as what he wants to do, because we've learned that he is telling us, in his own way what he wants. So I know for me personally, in sixth grade, we were at the point that it was either institutionalize him or dig in deep to figure out how to understand what he was going through, and get some control under the behaviors that we were seeing, because he had put a teacher in the emergency room, and we had resource officers trying to press charges, and nobody was telling me what to do, right? Like, mom, it's all mom's, it's the parents' fault, of course, so we were blessed to have a BCBA that was amazing with us at that time. Sarah Taylor, that she came in and saved us from having to make decisions that we thought we were never going to have, and address some behaviors that I didn't think anybody would ever be willing to take on. I mean, after hearing a kiddo hurts a teacher, puts them in the emergency room, you don't get a lot of people lining up to say, "Oh yeah, we'll help," from there. So we were really blessed to be able to have a really solid RBT that came in that became like family too. So, but she passed. That was part for us. That was a hard thing for us, and that's why I know the importance of the job that everybody has done for our family, and why it's so important. And I, like Becca, like to cry. So, but yes, we've been very blessed to be able to have some services that were life-changing.
I want to pause, and I want to be sure everybody really heard what Holly said. And I think sometimes when it's our job, right, or when, like when I worked as a school psych, every sort of IEP meeting was every IEP meeting, but it's not, right? For our families, it's the most important to them. And that's why it's so key to not go on autopilot, and to not forget the human, and to not be on your phone when you're in session. And we don't have extra time, period, right? Says the person with MS. We don't have extra time with our kids. And I think that's a big part of why this month-long event came to be, is that each of us are, each moment, each trial, each interaction, each everything is an opportunity to move the needle forward or not. And that these are individuals' lives and families' lives, and that we are in a position that is scary because of the amount of like responsibility, but damn, we're also in a position to help impact change. I am not against complaining about things that aren't good, and you don't get to complain if you're not working on doing it better and different. And so I want to just acknowledge that everybody here is sharing very openly and directly. And while I'm recording, who knows what could happen. And so I will check in with everybody afterwards. And if it doesn't feel okay to post, we won't. Right? That's okay. It's more important that together we share this time to really learn and listen. So I appreciate that, Holly. Ryan?
Hi, everyone. I'm going to apologize in advance. I was having computer technical difficulties, so I'm on my phone, so it's a little more difficult. I did not realize I needed to bring tissue tonight, and so I have twin boys with autism. They are 18 now, and they were diagnosed about, they were about 2.5, just under 3 years old, and we started with early intervention right away, early intervention services here in North Carolina. And then once they turned 3, they were put into the preschool program through our county. My husband is retired military, and we have been fortunate enough to stay in the same area for the boys. So he's retired now, but they started, through the school system and did early preschool with them, and then kindergarten and so forth. And I think we started ABA actually with Dr. Becca before she was actually Dr. Becca. I think it was they were in 2nd grade at the time. And I can't even express it how helpful it was to both the boys in very different ways. Even though they're twins, they're extremely different. They're better at some things, not so good at others. They're very, very different boys. And I have to say, I was thinking about this, about like how ABA helped them so much. And I have to agree with Holly about, those concrete aspects, the emergency situations. But the one thing that we still realize this day that has helped them is labeling their emotions. And to this day, both boys can, for the most part, their names are Hunter and Chase. Chase can absolutely label every single emotion he has, and he will absolutely tell me what's going on. Mom, I'm feeling anxious today. And I'm like, okay, buddy, what's up? Hunter, he still struggles a little bit, but for the most part, he can tell us what's going on. And I am so grateful for that, because that's a hard thing. I actually asked Chase today, because he actually got the opportunity to see Dr. Becca recently. And I think he said to her that, didn't he say he missed you coming into the house? So I asked him, I said, what was your favorite part of ABA? And you'll probably laugh about this. He said the idioms. And he loves, to this day, he loves telling people all these different idioms that he learned. So we have a little different situation with Hunter. Sorry, I'm getting emotional now too. And Becca walked that walk with us. Dr. Becca did, and I so appreciate that. Back in 2018, Hunter really was struggling. We were kind of in a very similar situation as Holly, and he was not doing well. He was losing a lot of weight. He was having a lot of behaviors. And like Holly said, it was coming back to us about, kind of back on us what we were doing wrong. And my husband and I kept taking him to doctor after doctor, and they kept saying, this is autism, this is autism. And no one believed me that it wasn't autism. And Dr. Becca actually went with me to a doctor and said, there's something else going on with him. I've known him for a very long time. I've treated him. There's something else going on. And we pushed and we pushed, and we actually found out a few months later that he's got a rare genetic condition. It's nothing that's fatal. It's something he's going to have to deal with for the rest of his life. I'd say take that back. It can be fatal if it's not managed correctly. It is something that he can go into severe attacks, and that's what we were seeing. We were seeing a year-long severe attack because he was not being treated correctly medically. And so this genetic condition can actually, he does have autism, but when he goes into an attack, those attacks can also mirror behaviors of autism. So we find ourselves daily when he has behaviors, is this autism or is he in an attack? What's going on? And so it's a little bit tougher with him to kind of figure out. We've been dealing with it for obviously a couple of years now. It is getting a little bit easier for us to figure out if it's an attack or autism. But he's doing well now that we've figured it out. But I will be forever grateful for Dr. Becca for walking that walk with us and helping us push and get doctors to realize that, mamas know best sometimes.
And I think even more than that, I touched on our ethics code earlier, and I think this is another part it's not just in the code for no reason. We have to rule out medical. We must. And we can't, so if somebody has diabetes, I don't look at them and say, make more insulin and expect their pancreas to do it, right? I don't create a token board and expect to reinforce their pancreas for making more insulin. It doesn't work that way. And it's important that we do look at that code of ethics and look at why it exists, because it is autism. And it can be other things, right? It can be autism and a structural difference in the brain that causes some of the different behavioral manifestations or expressions. It can be autism and ADHD. It can be autism and an intellectual disability. It can be twice exceptional. And if you've not heard that language, that means it's autism and gifted, right? So an IQ above 130 or above. Autism is one piece of a person with autism, just like having MS is one part of me, right? Or having anxiety is one part of me. None of that is me in a whole. And because for behavior analysis, we so often get more hours, right? It's a more intensive intervention. Sometimes many times we see our kids and families so much more often than the physician, the speech path, the OT. And we're in a great position to collect a crap ton of data that can help those other specialty providers. I don't have to know what they know. I just have to collect really good data, and I kind of rock at that. And then I can present it to our families that they can bring to these other specialty providers, physicians, neurologists, psychiatrists, speech paths, teachers. We can share this information so that they can make good decisions. If you've heard me ever before, I talk about my mom, and she said the only good decisions are well-informed decisions. And our other specialty clinicians don't have the gift of the time that we have. And so we can be a gift to them by collecting data and giving it to families, or with the release of information, sending over, so that those clinicians can make the best decisions with their knowledge. So really, we are in this great position to kind of be a connector in many ways. And I appreciate you all sharing so openly. I wonder if you kind of shared a little bit about what was helpful. Can you talk a little bit about what was hard or what didn't rock about behavioral services?
Well, one of the things that I just want to say, to piggyback off of what you were saying, Beck, is that in my experience, it's always the behaviors, or I shouldn't say always, often it is the behaviors are because of the autism. And we've really struggled with getting recognition that there's something medical going on, specifically with Lily. So I'll share with you all that Lily was diagnosed with epilepsy this year when we had her first seizure activity. And it was really scary, something we'd never experienced before. And, the feedback at the beginning was, oh, we think this is behavioral. We think this is intentional. We think this is, whatever. And I remember countless nights talking to Becca and just being so pissed and so frustrated and crying, and having that support of someone saying, okay, let's look at it this way. Let's, kind of figure it out this way. And so in my personal experience, when you talk about what didn't work, most of what we dealt with didn't work. We didn't have ABA services that we could access at the time that my kids were younger. And then by the time they started to develop here in Pennsylvania, access was very difficult for us. We ran into a lot of barriers. And so basically what we were getting in our home was kind of the best that we could do. And a lot of the BHRS services here would say, oh, we do ABA. But it wasn't. It was just incorporating some of the techniques and then saying, oh, this is ABA. And it was not. So what really didn't work for us was just, there wasn't a thorough or good understanding of autism, in my opinion. The practitioners that we were getting were used to kids who had behavioral issues for a number of different reasons and diagnoses. And so trying to get something specific to help both of our kids was really challenging. And then the fact that we have two kids, like, we all know autism is a spectrum. We have two kids who are entirely different, from IQ to functioning to how they just manage and deal in life, their understanding of things, and then just in general, who they are as people. They're just very different people. And so we had these providers that were almost trying to do the same things for both kids. And that didn't work for us. We actually made the decision to stop services, not because I felt like my kids didn't need services or didn't need support, or we didn't need support. But it wasn't doing anything to actually help us. The schools were doing a lot to help us. Becca was doing a lot to help us from North Carolina and just being my friend. but we weren't getting the support from the professionals. And even now, getting someone who, you know, understands autism, even if it's a specialty service. So for example, the psychiatrist approach things differently. They just approach things as like a general mental health. Well, that's not exactly what we need. And I didn't feel that I really had consistency with either kid in providers. That was a huge issue for us. We would get real good with one. We felt like really, really comfortable with one of them, and they'd be with us for a year or a year and a half, and we'd feel like we'd be getting progress, and then it would go to crap. They would leave and we'd get somebody else. And then you almost feel like you're starting fresh. You're building a new rapport. You're dealing with trusting somebody you don't know coming into your house, into your life. It's very personal to have someone come in that capacity, and you have to be vulnerable. And at the same time, you know, Holly and Ryan were talking about it, you feel defensive because you know, or you feel, whether it's true or not, that you are being judged on your parenting, that it's like, oh, you're not doing good enough. Or if I didn't get to that data collection sheet this week, I did something wrong. So I think that what didn't work for us was the changes when we'd be developing trust and something working. It just, you know, felt like that person would leave. And then we got some really bad providers. We got providers who shared a lot about themselves, who wanted to focus on their stuff. Not necessarily.
Can I interrupt real quick? Because
Yeah.
you've said some things that are really good, and I want to be sure that they land, because I think they're common, whether it's in this group or in other parents, you know, whether I work with as a BCBA or as a psychologist. So one of the big things is that individualization. And for Lily and T, I would say for all kids, particularly since what we do is individualized, it should be individualized. And so sometimes what we see is this SOP, right? The standard operating procedure. Everybody gets a token board, everybody gets 40 hours, everybody gets blah, blah, blah. Well, that's not individualized. And so for those of us on the call, I want to really implore you to remember that if we're doing the same thing each time, we might have gone on autopilot. And it's not malintent. And it's also not acceptable. So if you're working for an organization and that organization says we always do ... unless that always is followed by look at each child individually and program for them individually, I would maybe think of that as a red flag, right? We might be worried. We might want to get more information, because we know, if you know one human, we know one human, let alone one human with autism, one human with autism. So it must be individualized. And when we don't do that, we do not see the benefit. And we are the professionals. And so we must be the ones doing that. And it shows, right? So it shows. So individualize always in all ways. I think the other part is the changes and those transitions. And that is important. It also happens, right? So living at Camp Lejeune, we have a lot of transition. And how do we factor that into our plans, right? So I know that I'm going to have staff for generally 2 or 3 years, and I'm generally going to have families for 2 or 3 years, because that's sort of what a tour looks like. And so knowing that, what do we do? Or knowing that the RBT or the BT is an entry-level position, which is tough to even say because it's not entry-level work, there is going to be more transition. So as an owner, my responsibility is to take really good care of my staff. That doesn't mean everybody's going to stay, but they're not leaving for things that are like, they don't have the materials they need, or things like that. And I think that's, you know, to really hear those things that Beth is saying is key, because those come up a lot. And then that third one of that light better be on who you're providing service, right? So if we think about life as I'm sure the Del Mar RBTs are probably like, oh, Becca, don't say this again, but it's that important. So it's like a stage, and that light has to be on who you're serving, right? So if I'm your supervisor, my light is on you when we're in supervision. If I'm your therapist, that light is on you 100%. It's not like half on me, half on you. It's 100% on you. If I'm serving a child in whatever capacity, that light is totally on them. If I start talking about me, that light's doing this. Skirt. Nope. It's got to be on them. My light that light gets to be on me in my own therapy or in my personal relationships, not my professional relationships. So it's really key. And Stephen is saying it's so important for therapists to hear firsthand voices, and that's exactly right. And Stephen, that's why your voice is unparalleled, because it's yours and because you feel comfortable and able to share that experience. I wonder sometimes if there are kids that I served when I was a younger clinician and I didn't know as much as I know now, and we as a field didn't know what we know now. And when you wrote that you had that NEAT counselor, I wonder if there are kids who would consider me a NEAT counselor and some who might not have, because I didn't know what I didn't know and I wasn't listening. We just didn't know. And so it's cringy. I do better, right? We stay connected. We do better as we learn. But yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. And I think what we've learned is assent is so key. And so a 3-year-old can tell me that this doesn't work for him by pulling away from me, by turning his shoulder from me, by crying, right? I hear that as communication and I'm going to back off. We have to, right? He's a human. Whereas previously there was a lot more focus on compliance. And if you're going to be here Saturday, you'll hear my talk on trauma assumed ABA, trauma assumed interaction, right? It's not trauma informed, it's assumed. It's got to, it happens. So we got to just act like everybody has been through that. So, so Beth, you landed on those 3 things that are so important that I want to be sure folks are hearing, because I don't think they're just you. I don't think that's just your experience.
I see Holly and Ryan nodding in agreement. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very common experience that we have. And I just want to note to Stephen, because I did see your question, and for us now that the kids are older and they are better able to articulate to us, both my children are verbal, and they make sure to let me know their thoughts. And we use that to the best that we can. So for us, we have some, I guess, like non-choice in the fact that currently they have to engage in whatever treatment we have in line, but they get to kind of choose what they share. So the example I'll give is my son sees a mental health therapist. The rule is he has to go, but then he gets to choose if and what he talks about. And so right now his choice is he doesn't want to talk about feelings. He will talk about facts. So that often helps him to talk about what he wants to talk about. And then the conversation can naturally evolve in the direction he wants to. So yes, he gets an active voice in that. We had him engaged in like a special needs gym. He articulated to me that wasn't working for him. He felt very uncomfortable and we stopped that. So we very much try to allow both kids to, within reason, kind of align how things they want to do. Lily would like to drive. I don't know that that's going to happen safety wise for her, but we find alternatives. So she goes and drives go-karts, and then we're going to get her connected with OVR who can do a simulator. So we try to listen to their goals as much as possible.
And I was going to testify for so we had Dr. Becca back when it was the original therapy, back with Star, when we started. And it's funny because she talks about the impact that it has. And my son is not one to remember people. I mean, he might notice you, but to remember your name, he remembered you were gone for almost 3 years, right? In California. 5 years. Okay, yeah. So it was a long time. So the fact that he was able to remember her, when she came back, and I mean, as soon as I heard she was coming back, that was my first question. It's like, how do we sign up? So I mean, there's definitely been an impact there, but and I know for the challenge for us has always been kind of what Stephen touched on is, are we doing this for us or are we doing this for our kids? And I have to be honest, at times we were doing it for us because I didn't know what to do. The parent training side of it all that I think a lot of therapists don't do, or maybe they don't focus on enough, was empowering for me to realize that I was making the right choices. It was challenging to make the connection with our son or find the way to communicate. I knew the behaviors were communication. I knew there was something off, and I knew I wasn't the right person to interpret it yet. I needed somebody to help me find that bridge to make that connection with him so I could understand how to help him find his voice and how to have my son, communicate with us with not hurting somebody or hurting himself. So, and the challenge of being vulnerable, and having to be honest of, hey, my son put somebody in the hospital. I know for school that was the focus. From that moment on in school, he has been labeled that kid, and we have fought. We're still fighting to not be seen as that kid. And that he can be seen as so much more. So we've had those challenges, as far as feeling like you have to, how much do you have to tell, to get your point across, or the picture across, or the understanding of what you're trying to get. So, and I know Beth touching on the fact that the changing in people, that was always my biggest worry, is I didn't want him to get overly reliant on one person because I saw how attached he would get, or we went through a negative experience of losing somebody and I didn't want him to have to go through that, or I wanted it to be a lot of changes and to work on those. Excuse me, my dog. No, dad's home.
But I think that is exactly right. Those changes is really what it is we worry about how it's going to impact our kids and even our family, right? So let's say Holly's son is getting services, but it's in-home services. The rest of the family gets used to them coming too. And then there's a loss, not just for code, but even siblings and mom and dad. I mean, it can really be really tough.
Yeah, I know that was the other side. That was the other point I was going to bring up too, is the sibling side, just because that's always been kind of my big point. My kids definitely saw it. Why does somebody come in and just play with Cody? Why does Cody get to do this? Why are we always leaving to go do something because Cody needs to have it done? There is a definite balance, that has to come with it. And we've had some that were better at realizing that, yeah, it seems like it's an extra kid, but it is also those skills that you're working on, because Cody has a really hard time connecting with his siblings. And that was a goal that we wanted to try and help him build a bond with his siblings and have that connection. And didn't want to force it, but, definitely wanted to open up opportunities for them to figure it out and make them get the benefits from the therapy and not just see it as Cody getting a one-on-one time with somebody. We wanted them to see that we all can benefit from it on some level. I don't know. I personally think, Stephen, my son Caden, it's his younger brother. He taught me more about his brother than anybody has ever taught me, because Caden never saw Cody as anything other than Cody, where I felt like, we always saw the autism, or we always were trying to make an excuse for the autism. We're trying to figure out the autism. Autism was, the forefront for teachers, always advocating because of autism. It did become like, it comes like your whole life, that you're trying to figure out. Caden was definitely the one that said, he's just Cody, Mom. I don't know what I don't understand. So that real innocent view of, he was the one that taught me I am focusing on the wrong thing, that this is just my son, and that Caden has it right, that this is just who Cody is. And I think he was probably like 4 or 5 years old whenever that light went off for me. Caden was, so that meant Cody was probably 8 or 9, 10. So yeah, I think that's why also inclusion is so important. And if we would step back and let these kids just do what they need to do, we would all learn a whole lot more.
I'm gonna bounce off that inclusion piece real quick. I know it's not really the topic we're on, but I just had the same conversation, and I actually had it with Holly recently as well. I had it with a school about inclusion, and that when one of the boys is in the occupational prep program, so he goes out in the community 5 days a week and works, and one of them is at a grocery store. And there was a day that he got a little wound up. Wasn't anything severe. There's a big miscommunication, and the manager called and wanted to have a meeting. He wasn't there when it happened, but he heard like through the grapevine that Hunter was having some behaviors. And after talking to him, I realized that it really wasn't behaviors. Hunter was he was actually just stimming a little bit, and the people that were working don't understand autism. And so I had this conversation with the school about why this is so important that our kids are included in everyday activities, why they go out in the community is not just for them to learn, but for our community to learn what autism looks like. Because I live in a smaller town, and most of our town knows who my boys are. They've grown up here, so they're well known, but there's still quite a bit, and I would have to say it's probably a lot of our older population. The kids that have, the younger population has grown up, and they're 18, they're seniors in high school. They don't understand that, he might, jump around a little bit when he's getting excited or when he's getting anxious, and it's not aggressive. It's not, aggressive behavior at all. It's just Hunter. That's just what he does. And it's not going to hurt anyone. But it's so good for not only Hunter to get out, but our community to see that too.
Sort of related, but not totally. Beth, do you want to talk about Super Deli? Because I love it, because Lily loves it.
Yeah, I can totally talk about Super Deli. So Lily is in a life skills classroom in the middle school, and they take the kids out all the time to the community. So I completely agree with you, Ryan, that that's really what needs to happen for everyone. But so one of the things that they do is this thing called Super Deli. Every month, the kids put together a menu, figure out what grocery items or ingredients they'll need. They go to the grocery store as a group. They actually just went today. Lily was responsible for getting the apple cider and some soda, I think she said. I asked her what was on her list. And then they get the experience. They have to go through and purchase the items. They get a card. They have to use the card machine. And they're supported through all of this, obviously, by the staff who's with them. And then they, 2 days later, they make all the food. They set up the room where everything is going to be all the kids have a different serving job, or they're the hostess or greeter, or they run the cash register. And then there's someone who actually pre-COVID would go through and like bust the tables and take your plates. And Lily always takes it very seriously. So she has learned some really great customer service skills. And she will be super, super polite to all the customers going through, except me, I'm mom. And then she will have her support person, her helper, whatever, beside her, trying to help her learn how to do this correctly, or, you know, whatever. And she will growl at that person. So, you know, very Lily, but to all her customers, she's perfect, very polite. And then after they have, it runs for 2 hours. And when it's done, the people who come are teachers. They sell to the teachers, the aides, any of the staff in the building, and then parents and family are invited to come as well. So then they have to clean everything up, and then they get to eat. So it's very much like a kind of normal experience as if you were working in a restaurant in that way. It's giving them all the vocational stuff, but then also the social pieces of that, because they all have to work together to be able to make this happen. And then there's always an employee of the month, which is basically whoever comes gets to write who they thought did the best. Lily really enjoys being able to be employee of the month. And I think what's been the coolest part of it for me is actually to see how it translates into other areas. Lily has actually generalized this. So when we do outreaches to our homeless, and part of that is them coming through the line and getting the goods that they would like to get. And Lily will always have one thing she's focused on. It's typically Slim Jims. And she will hold that out to every single person and say, would you like a Slim Jim, please? You know, and then she lets them take it. And she sometimes gets a little forceful and she's like, take a Slim Jim. And we have to remind her, hey, Lil, you know, they don't want one. But it's really cool to see how those skills that she has learned, and this started when she was in 6th grade. So she was 12 or 13, I guess, at the time, have really even started to generalize to when she feels like she's working. So, yep, that's super, Deli. It's pretty rad.
I would even gently challenge, it's not when she feels like she's working, man. Like, do
Well,
you remember
yeah,
she was so nervous when she went, and then she
Mhm.
did great. And I think this connects to with really Stephen's whole message, which is kind of get the hell out of the way and let them do stuff,
Yeah.
you know, like especially your children are teens now. And I think that, in my just sort of the 2 cents of me, is I think there's been so much focus on early intervention and little kids with autism, and they grow up to be big kids with autism. And so we need to start talking about discharge at intake, and we need to start talking about vocational skills at 4, and what do they want to do? I mean, that idea that Stephen mentioned about, you know, what do they want to do? I had put in the chat about Cody loves, is it okay to share, Holly? So Cody loves technology, and he is really good at like post-production modification, like effects on videos. He has his own YouTube channel. And so when he was younger, maybe it was thought as, oh, maybe this is just a STEM. I hear a career path. I hear an interest. I hear, even if it is a self-stimulatory behavior, guess what? So is me eating Oreos. So is me looking on all these, that's exactly right, doing video production. So he has learned how to do so much. And really all we taught him was how to Google so that he could pick out keywords, and then how to watch a YouTube video and imitate what he saw. And he can now do tons and tons of things. And so I think it's super important to value and hear those voices, right? The voice of Stephen, the voice of Lil, the voice of Hunter, the voice of Chase, the voice of Cody, the voice of Tristan. We have to hear these voices and not just hear it and then say, oh, thanks for sharing, and now it's time to do this. It's, man, I hear that you are stoked on video production. I don't know much about it, but I can learn to get you started, and I can find people for you to work with that can help move you further than I can. We have to. That's that leisure part that Stephen talked about, right? Yes, we need to work on some of these behaviors like that are medically necessary and educationally necessary. And I don't work and do school all the time. I'm looking at pugs on Instagram. I'm posting weird memes, especially about Little Debbie's Christmas tree cakes, which are like my favorite now that it's Christmas, on Facebook. You know, I mean, we all get to have leisure activities, and nobody tells me whether it's valid or not.
But
I mean,
don't
they
you
might,
think?
and like, I don't care. So we need to do that for our kids, right? Oh, it looks like Stephen, you can talk. I think you're able to talk, right? you're welcome to chat, but you're certainly-
I'd like to pose a question for you,
Yes.
if you don't mind.
Please do.
The question is, as somebody who's an international speaker, I also do life after high school transition planning. The real question I see here is, I think we need to, how would you go about recommend schools diversify the career paths that we prepare people for? And the reason I'm asking this is because, yes, Lily's program may be good, but the real question, okay, for people who want careers in retail, but the real career is, we've seen a disproportionate number of graduates from those, or not so graduate certificates of attendance, go to retail and fast food. But what we're experiencing now is we're experiencing a decline in those number of jobs. We're experiencing store closures at a record rate. We're experiencing more people shopping through Amazon and online. We're experiencing malls that are going dead. If you go to Dan Bell or Ace's Adventures or Retail Archaeology or any of those channels on YouTube, you'll see video after video after video of malls closing up, going vacant, declining. So I've been thinking about this, and with COVID being endemic, and then the cost of living going through the roof, to SSI and Medicaid can't sustain the costs anymore. I think we're going to have a big shift. I want your opinions on this, toward careers with a living wage salary for people with disabilities, and diversifying the path across many more industries. What is your take on that?
Yes.
And how can that be accomplished?
Well, I think for me, and I was going to say this with Becca, is that, you know, I think for me, the kiddos that I've seen with autism, they have those and I know you guys will know this. I love it when somebody goes, well, what can he do? Like, what's that talent, or what's that savant, or what's
Yes.
that thing, and, I think that's what we've learned, is that those are talents. Those are special things. Cody has taught me that, Becca's talking about having that leisure too. Cody doesn't leave his room. Cody doesn't want to leave. We offer, we try, he has any opportunity. We never stop asking him, do you want to go bowling? Do you want to go with us? We went to the Renaissance Fair this weekend. I asked for 2 weeks, hey, this is what we're doing. Show them pictures. This is where we're going. Show them pictures of the hotel. This is what we're doing. Asked again before we left, had a bag packed just in case he wanted to go, because I'm waiting for the day that he says yes. He loves being on his computer. He loves using that technology, or that speed, or that is where Cody is on that computer, and then coming down and asking us about it, and then going back up and finding something else. And that has been what I've advocated for since he was in 6th grade. I've said, can we please teach him how to use that computer to give him a life? Can we please teach him the computer skills? I showed our district Digitability, and I said, look, here's a program. I think this would be perfect for him. I showed them Exceptional Minds out of California, with all the kids on the spectrum that are working with all these movie theaters and video production. I said, can we please give him this opportunity here? I begged for him to be part of the CTE program. I totally agree that my son could be independent, living in his room, ordering things offline for himself, and making videos. And if we could figure out the right pieces to put together to give him the connection to that world. He hasn't figured that part out. I haven't figured that part out, but we're not in a hurry.
Give us a couple of suggestions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
One is, how old is he?
He's 20.
has he considered an online degree in computers or video production or anything like that? That would be my first approach, because I think he could become, if he wants to work from home, that's fine. That's common with the virus and everything. But I think it's nothing wrong with becoming a home video editor, or become a webmaster, or become a programmer, or become a game designer or something. I think if those would be things you could explore for a career for him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. We've looked at like some of the stuff that's free for Google, and see what he can do. I think our biggest challenge is finding how to diversify it or differentiate it in a manner that he can connect with. And at this point, for us, we've been pretty blessed. He does it himself. We have not. He comes to me and says, "Mom, I want to try this program. I want to download it." He downloads it, and 2 days later, he's uploading something. And I think the biggest challenge is that's holding him back is me. Is I can't find the right thing or produce the right
would
thing or
check
get
out
the right. Yeah.
community college, or maybe a university, or some kind of a thing like that might have a good option.
I don't know if Cody still wants to do school, and then that's the next challenge, right? Is that
Mhm.
whenever we're talking with him, he still now goes to school because I think he thinks that's just what he does, and that's where we're at currently for him
Maybe
as
you should
well.
offer him the suggestion. Just want to say this video. If it's a training in something he likes, might be worth it, different from the transition program in the high school.
Exactly. And that's kind of where we're at right now too, is that we just want Cody to understand that we're not supposed to be in high school forever. We want to try and gently. We're blessed because Dr. Becca, Cody actually works at Del Mar. And so we're blessed that he is in an environment that I feel comfortable with. I know for sure. I know he does too, because all he ever says is, "When do I get to go see Dr. Becca? When do I get to go see Dr. Becca?" So I know it's reassuring to know that he has had that voice. He's the reason why I've fought for it as hard as I fought for it for as long as I fought for it, because he's the one asking for it. So for him to ask for it, that's a big deal. So I mean, that's a big deal. So, but no, I agree. And I think our challenge here is, and us being military family, our school district is an uphill battle, and has been it's been a battle for everything. And so I think the one thing I have learned is not relying on our school district as much as I've relied on it, and that I need to realize that it's been used, and we've done what we could with it at this point. I wish I knew more earlier on, and that's part of the challenge that we have as parents as well, is that we want it for our kids. We want to make it happen. It's just knowing the avenue and how to navigate these systems and to fight for your kid. You think, oh, that's easy. And man, special education and the laws and dealing with teachers and dealing with TAs and the supports that you trust, that you think they're coming from the right place. And most of them most of them believe what they're doing. They aren't trying to be malicious. They aren't intentionally sabotaging our kids. It's a layers of our executive staff not supporting the admin, not supporting the teachers, and not supporting our TAs. Our TAs want to do things. It's typically our TAs in the schools that are doing most of the work with our kids, because they're the ones. They're not there for money. They're invested because they want to help these kids. So, but they can't do it all on their own. They can't create miracles without a support team for themselves. It's just like a parent and can't do it on their own. You need that support team. So I think that's the other challenge parents run into as well, is that we are always feeling like our fight for our child is so much more. It's so easy to forget that I do have my child that I'm fighting for, but you also feel like you're fighting this other bigger battle of changing systems and thinking past where you're at right now. You can't just think about where you're at right now, because you have to plan 10 years ahead to be ready for whatever happens. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges there.
I'm going to piggyback off that a little bit too. And I think as a whole, we need to start looking at some of these occupational skills much earlier than what we are. I think there's some states that are doing a really good job at doing that. We live in the same school district as Holly, so our school district does not do that. They do it very late and have very low expectations for our kids, which hurts them significantly. When Hunter started the occupational prep program in 9th grade, the skill that they were teaching him was cleaning tables, and that's all they were doing. That's what the plan was for 4 years, was cleaning tables and emptying trash cans. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not what Hunter wanted to do. Hunter does not like cleaning. He doesn't like cleaning his bedroom. He doesn't like cleaning the house. He surely doesn't want to go clean a cafeteria. And so we had to have a very long talk with the school about, he can do more than that. He is perfectly capable of doing more than that, and he should be allowed the opportunity to do more than that. So unfortunately, I see the expectations from others being a huge issue. I've seen it everywhere. And like I said, I'm sure there's some states that are doing a much better job than our state is, and our county, especially. And like Holly said, our county has been a fight. I've fought very similar battle as she has. So in fact, I had Hunter and Chase have been very interested in baking, and so they started baking dog treats, and we started learning about that at home because they weren't being taught it at school. So we do what we got to do, right?
We've had a little bit of a different experience. Fortunately, where the district that we live in has a really great focus on starting those interventions early for kids like Lily, who have a more, whatever you want to say, however you want to say it. So they do really great in that regard, in building those skills early on. They actually do a vocational assessment with the kids that's really comprehensive, and it's focused purely on what they like and what they don't like. And so I know very clearly Lily hates cleaning. I know very clearly that Lily wants to do something that is social, so that she has other people around her when she works, but that not necessarily as a team working together for something. So her own individual task, but with people around her. She likes creative things and doing like flower arrangements, for example. But what she's articulated is she wants to work in the hospital. And the reason is because I work in the hospital. And so then it becomes about, for me, okay, what job at the hospital would meet some of the interests that Lily has, as well as who she is as a person. So Lily has a really great sense of direction, and she really likes talking to people and being around people. So I could totally see her being somebody who helps people find their way through the hospital, for example, if that's what she wanted. So our focus is always for both kids, what they want to do. Where I've found the struggle is actually with Tristan, who is quote unquote higher functioning. He's that twice exceptional that Becca alluded to earlier. He has very high IQ, and he has some significant struggles in other areas, and a lot of executive functioning type stuff. But there's not the help for him in the same way. I think, one of the things that Tristan actually says to me is, how come Lily gets to go to the store and learn how to do this stuff with her class? How come Lily is getting to go to, there's this thing called BizTown where they get to go and have a job and, do that for a day. How come Lily gets to go again? Because she gets to go every year. So a lot of the feedback from him is that he wants that kind of guidance and things that he already at 13 is saying, I don't know how to have it. I don't know how to fill out an application. I don't know how to get to my job. How am I supposed to know what I'm supposed to do? So even him knowing somebody's going to help you learn how to do an application, somebody is going to walk through the steps, and that somebody ends up being me, of what you do when you go to a job for the first time and what that looks like. So I think in our case, that's where the failure lies. That said, he actually has just recently expressed an interest in going to VOTech when he goes to high school. And he's specifically interested in masonry and carpentry. And I think that it very much matches him. He likes to build things. He likes to play with things, Legos, or he'll take wood and create something, so both of those things are very much where his interest is. So I'm with you, Stephen. I want my kids to have jobs and career paths that they enjoy. Our kind of presentation to them is, you will have a job. So that's basically my only expectation, is you have a job, whatever that job is, whatever you want to, however you want to proceed, and we'll support you and help figure out how to make that happen.
Okay. I do want to acknowledge we've gone over a little bit, and so those who've left, that's totally okay. Those who've stayed, I really appreciate it. Stephen, Holly, Beth, Ryan, I appreciate all of you more than I can say, because I think these are those conversations, right? Or we're really just listening. We have to hear what Stephen and other autistic individuals are saying as they can relate back to us their experience, so that we can learn and do better for the next kids coming and the next kids. And we need to hear what our parents' experience is so that we can do better, right? So that we can hear, and man, maybe I can't totally do a ton about the changes. How can I make them smoother, right? Do they have to be as smooth as sandpaper? No. So when Cody was 7 or 8 and we were using videos as, let's say, reinforcement, did we also miss an opportunity to help him start learning those skills then, and really hear that this is not just maybe it can be reinforcing and a job. I love my job so much so that I find extra ways to do it, right? Because I love it. And so I want people to have jobs that they love, and that is not likely washing windows or cleaning tables most times. If that's what people love, cool, but that's not what you do because there's no other options. And so really listening, yes, listen to your BCBAs, listen to that about treatment program. Be concerned if those BCBAs are not listening to parents, and they're not tuning into autistic voices, and then they're not learning from those that we're serving. Again, if you are part of an organization that you look around and there is not representation in some capacity by the people you serve, be concerned. And I would gently challenge you to open that dialogue with your BCBA, with the owner, your manager, somebody, and say, I really would love to see how we can do differently or better in this area, because I think it's really important. These are people's lives, like Stephen's experience and how he found his way to disability studies, to being in a college environment where he's not just surviving, he's thriving. And I have no doubt that he's going to make meaningful contributions through his dissertation and beyond. We've got to keep listening. And every individual we serve is a Stephen, right? Every parent you engage with is Beth, Ryan, or Holly. We've got to listen to them and center them in the same way that we've created this stage here on this one Wednesday to center these voices. And so my hope is that this is the beginning of a conversation. It's opening the door to a conversation. And if you want to talk about how you can bring this up in your organization, send me an email. I'm happy to help you kind of compose that language so we can talk about, to help you present that in a way that's more likely to be heard. It's that important. So I'm going to stop the recording. I forgot it was on. And again, I just